And thank you for joining this fourth talk on empowering women, public space and climate change, which is co-organized by BIDS Belgium and City Space Architecture. My name is Luisa Bravo. I'm the founder and president of City Space Architecture, and I will be co-moderating this fourth talk with Rosina Spinois from BIDS Belgium. Just a short introduction to give some information regarding this talk series that we are organizing. The topic is empowering women, public space and climate change. And as I said, it's a bottom-up initiative, which is intended to focus on women leadership from different backgrounds and expertise, public, private sector, but also research, academia, and practitioners. Community organizations and leaders from non-profit institutions. We are glad to have this fourth talk in cooperation with Her City, a joint initiative of UN Habitat and the Global Utmaning based in Sweden. And also this session has as a partner the new European Bauhaus, which is this brand new initiative promoted by the European Commission. So we are expanding our work and activities, also developing partnerships and cooperation with other organizations and global entities. So I now would like to give the floor to Rosina just to say a few words regarding the new European Bauhaus. Since today, actually, the new European Bauhaus opened the festival in Brussels.
Thank you, Louisa. Thank you for that introduction. And as Louisa mentioned, I'm from BIDS Belgium and one of the initiators of this project of empowering women in public space. And also, as Louisa mentioned, today is in fact the launch of the new European Bauhaus Festival, of which BIDS Belgium is a partner. And just to give you a little bit of background about this and for the audience that we'll share this with, between the period of the 9th and the 12th, the new European Bauhaus Festival will take place around Europe and also here in Brussels. It's a creative and interdisciplinary initiative that connects to the European Green Deal, to our living spaces and experience as described on the website. And it calls on us to really imagine and build together a sustainable and inclusive future that is beautiful in our eyes, minds and souls. And so it's about places, practices and experiences. So it's really in this session that we will link to this and really to ask our speakers also how they can share their experience and how the new European Bauhaus values of inclusive, sustainable and beautiful are incorporated within their work, and how this can really leverage the importance of gender equality for more sustainable cities as an efficient tool for the fight against climate change. Also, how diverse leaders from different backgrounds can also really come together from architecture, policy making, from grassroots initiatives and corporates and urbanists, etc. And seeing how we can co-design inclusive, sustainable and a beautiful way of living. So that's really the sort of outline, certainly for today's session, which is in line with the festival that launched this morning. And with that in mind, as Louisa said, we'll co-moderate together, introducing each of you together also. And just to also apologise on Daisy's behalf, who was due to join us. She unfortunately has come down with COVID. So our thoughts are with Daisy, and she's really become quite unwell. So she sent a message this morning sending her apologies to us all. So on that note, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Lisa Lang. Thank you for joining us. Lisa is the Director of Policy and EU Affairs and the orchestrator of the EIT Climate KIC. The Climate KIC is a knowledge and innovation community established and funded by the EIT, which is the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, in 2010. So Lisa, I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce the work that you do. And of course, this is just one of your titles, of course, because you're also, of course, recognized by Forbes Europe Top 50 Women in Tech. So I hand it over to you to explain more about your work.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. Hello, you wonderful people. Sunny greetings from Belgium, Brussels. The sun just came out. So yeah, well, my day job is like I'm the, I'm like in EU policy affairs, but as you might notice, I'm not like a typical policy person. So I have a design background, a software engineering background, and then I threw business in and created 3 companies. And I became an entrepreneur because I wanted to generate impact. And during my journey in entrepreneurship, I realized there's also an interesting backbone, like as we system engineers would say, like the back end, and it's called policy. So over the years, I transitioned to policy because, like, if we really want to make a change, EIT Climate Kick, we're all about system change, that we are all trapped in silos and we simply just have to create bridges. And one of those bridges is European Bauhaus, because art and design creates emotional connections. It makes people care. It's inclusive and sustainable by its core. And that's also with EIT Climate Kick. It's like we are actually the project manager for the European Bauhaus Cross Kick, very much in partnership with the Joint Research Center. But like what we do at the Kick is the name for Knowledge Innovation Community. So EIT has been built as kind of like the implementation innovation platform for the European Commission. So we have a direct mandate from the Commission. We are financed by the European Commission, so we are building the bridge between the policy theory of Joint Research Center in European Bauhaus, and we are like the implementers. And of course, for us, it makes totally sense teaming up with culture and creativity, because we acknowledge them as the agents of change, because culture and arts is everywhere. It doesn't matter if you go in automotive or in the chemical industry or tourism. But also what was important is like that now culture creative industries actually has been acknowledged as a industry by the European government in 2019. So that is really important, because guess what, when we actually tell those agents of change that they're acknowledged, that's important, that they're acknowledged on a political level, and now we have to train and raise another army. So that's kind of like my job, especially also because EIT hasn't been built for the creatives in mind. So now we have to kind of like explain, like, so these are the flowers, these are the bees, and when they come together, they're really happy. So that's kind of like, I'm trying to gamify everything out of that. So, but just to wrap this up, it's like, what a wonderful time to be alive. We are in a historic moment that finally arts and culture has a place in the cold, dark corners of policy. And I'm sitting on the other side, bringing a lot of warm confetti, but also serious system engineering in this. And I just, bring in the open doors. So always feel free to reach out to me. I'm here to enable, I'm here to build bridges.
Well, thank you, Lisa. It's very, passionate and pushing for arts and culture, because actually this is what women working in creative industries need, to have a proper program that is designed also to include women dealing with such projects and activities like we are trying to do with these Empowering Women talks. So thank you for your intervention. I hope we will have time to discuss also later with other speakers. Now I would like to introduce the second speaker, Madeline Spencer. Madeline is a leader in placemaking arts, education, community engagement, economic pipeline development, and downtown management. She is the founder of Diamond Heart Enterprises, the Venus Foundation, and Urban Alchemy. She's the co-founder of the Boca de Oro Festival, is an advisor for Santa Ana XQ Super School, and also she has been part of the leadership team of Placemaking X, Placemaking US, sorry, a growing network where she's dedicated to modeling standards of diversity, equity, and inclusion within the United States. Thank you for joining, Madeline.
Thank you so much for having me here today. And what an amazing platform you've created to empower women. I do have a little presentation. I don't know if you would like me to share that now.
Sure. Can you share?
Let me see here. Oops. Oh, it says it needs to be host disabled participant screen sharing.
I'm giving you a possibility to.
Okay. Today, I just wanted to say that, as I began really thinking about what I wanted to share today, it kind of took me through sort of this history, because I really wanted to think out, what does it mean when we discuss empowering women? And as all of us know that because we've been raised in a structure of patriarchy and legacies of races, all the different kinds of structures that keep women out of the sense of empowerment, I realized that I kind of needed to trace sort of a lineage or history of that for myself as well. So I just have here, let's see if I can share this. Okay, this is my screen share. And I just have this as a PDF. So let me see if I can just scroll down here. I just wanted to start out by saying that I myself personally am a part of this lineage in the United States. I know we have this contextual history where I actually am a mixed person of multiple lineages. So my mother's Italian, and I have a grandmother that's Dutch, German, and I also have a Native American great-grandparents who were on the land here originally, and also a part of slavery. And slaves actually married Native Americans at some point because they had more status as people. And just in thinking about women and land and climate change, one of the things that we recognize is that space and place have been marginalized, the sense of space and land being wasted, abandoned, violated, invaded, ignored, carved up, traded, sold as a commodity, squandered by neglect and lack of vision. And I just wanted to share that all of these things, it's kind of like this, what all of this lives inside of us and inside of me as a person, because I'm a part of all of those histories. And this is just sort of a chart that shows the different countries of my family's origin and my parents. So My background before coming into the city was actually community psychology, eco-psychology, indigenous psychology, and liberation psychology, which is what I studied in the depth psychological tradition. So I have the belief that the unconscious is real, and that there's motives within the unconscious. And when I first came into the city of Santa Ana, it was as an activist, and it was actually during the Occupy movement, which it was about 2011. And as I entered, I also was finalizing my graduate studies in this area of community psychology. So the whole community for me was on the psychological couch per se. And I was looking at the community. And I remember the very first thing that I encountered was that in our community, the two presenting issues happened to be houselessness and also immigration and a fear of displacement. And when I say immigration, I live in a city that is a minority majority city. 80% of the population is Latino, and they're from Mexico. We also have a large Asian population from Vietnam and other parts of Asia, including Cambodian refugees. And in seeing the community as a whole, which is a community of immigrants, there is this continual feeling of not belonging and a fear of displacement, as well as this houselessness. And as women, I think that one of the things that we seek to do is to find ways to house, to connect those who don't feel belonging. And as I said, one of the first entrances in is I was fighting with my community around issues of homelessness. I was fighting for transparency, for strategic planning in the city, and for a wellness resolution, as well as economic development. We were very fortunate to have won it. And it was the first policy changes that I had actually been a participant in actually writing policy. So it really thrust me right into the center of, first of all, my ability as an individual in community to be able to make change. I actually got to put the word inclusion and equity throughout a document and actually see that my words had some meaning that could be legislated. So the other thing is that from that process, I was asked by a series of businesses to come into the city and literally to begin helping, because there was an imbalance in the way that the structure of our downtown was functioning. And basically that was that the ecosystem in the downtown was an entertainment district, which was causing a lot of things to happen because it's single use. There was limited diversity, limited flexibility, the amplified need for security, and it wasn't attractive to daytime uses throughout the downtown. And even though what was going on is people were coming to enjoy and party in the city at night. And one of the things that happened is, in a request by businesses for me to help, I had written a memorandum of understanding to the city asking that they look at a way to create a more balanced downtown. And 2 weeks after I had put in that memorandum, a young woman was kicked to death by another woman in the downtown waiting in a line. And so this is just an image showing that that's kind of how I entered. So there was like sort of this violence. And as I began to really look at the ecosystem of place and began to work within the downtown, I started to notice that it's not only just that imbalance, but even in the natural elements of the downtown, there were a lot of things that started to show that everything was kind of out of balance in that ecosystem. One of the things that I found very stark was that we have trees in our public squares, and those trees were continually pruned at the wrong time of the year. So in the summer, when people needed shade, they were cut, versus when in the winter when it's cool. And even if you look at how plants do better, pruning would normally happen. And so I'm trying to bring in the fact that there's layers to this recognition of things being out of balance. Another thing that I noticed right away was the community in itself there was no common day that was for all of the different groups within our community to come. And typically, like, many cities will like celebrate something together. So it became a very big goal to bring some kind of a festival that was a common space that all people could be a part of. And something that I noticed right away is that the city festivals versus the community festivals were very different. And the community festivals were about the Day of the Dead, they were about the Day of Women, and they were about the Day of the Child. And those festivals were actually very beautiful, and they actually helped the downtown as a whole, whereas some of the other festivals that were in the downtown actually were too large for the space. And we would find that businesses, et cetera, would actually do worse during those days because they were impacted by the closures, by the space. And so you also started to see that there was distinct need for reorganizing how space was being used. Some of the things that we began to do to help this. So the event was the very first intervention in trying to bring an inclusive space that had all ages, that wasn't just people at nightlife, et cetera. So intersectional events we began to actually work on. And one of them that was very successful was a street breakfast. And I had been sitting for years in City Hall for around 4 years. So I had seen people from two sides of a city always fighting, but I had never seen them together. And seeing everybody in one space at a breakfast in downtown was a huge distinctive change and a shift in the way even of relating to one another, because it was no longer just about fighting. It was also about that a community needs time to talk. And a lot of times you get polarized when you have no dialogue. So that was something that was very important as we were going through this. The other thing that I found as a wonderful intervention, and it's something that I had to very strategically look at, was that we had a lot of events in our downtown, but a lot of times the events were managed by males, and a lot of times males will tend to allow for things to occur in these events that also end up with drinking and violence and such. And I began to hear from women in the community there was things that they wanted to do in downtown space. So the buildup of public markets by women actually started to actually create a very beautifully, women did a very good job of being stewards of space, of not having things that ended up in fights, etc. And that really became very interesting and important to me in recognizing that if we want to maintain and have a beautiful downtown and beautiful spaces, we have to make sure that it's always including all people. And women seem to have a mind for always making sure that all are included, and making sure that within those spaces also that there's spaces for children, that there's spaces for the elderly, that there's spaces for folks who don't have all abilities. So anyway, this is something that became an amazing intervention. And I just want to mention one specific intervention where a young woman who I had actually found because of the way that she had spoken about what she wanted to do, which was to create a lifestyle brand for our downtown community, that actually empowered the community, because she always heard negative things about our community. And she also had a dream that people in the local community would be able to make their own products and bring them out and actually share them. And so we found a local space that was an abandoned area that is called the Blue Lot, that is one of the placemaking United Streets project. And she began this gente market, which is the people's market, and local makers were creating things. And she's one of the women, and she introduced me to another woman who actually became someone that we began to sponsor through our downtown, who does a professional development network for women. So, and this professional development, these are all the different kinds of interventions to rebalance this ecosystem that I was describing at the beginning. So these women that we found, very powerful, amazing entrepreneurial women, mothers, wives, everybody would come together, and there began to be a space for women to support women in both business and in life. And this became anchored in the downtown district. And then now I had even a forum and a place to begin to bring women who were doing different things into the public sphere in terms of how, for example, a woman DJ versus a male DJ that could help to bring some kind of an event, etc. So it became a network where you could find other women that were doing this. And I just want to show that there began to be annual forums, work groups, lecture series, business networking. And we were like, we're going to end up hiring all women for everything in our downtown to help, again, rebalance the space. And we have begun this and started, and now we have vendors at different festivals that are all from these groups. My kid-friendly city initiative, which we began, it actually is also, we found a woman through this group called Mommies Unidas, United Mothers, and we're able to work with her and others in Amigas to begin working on making kid-friendly spaces throughout our downtown as well. And one of the things about this connective tissue that started to grow and emerge within the downtown is that at days like Mother's Day, you see a picture of women with flowers, and they would take them to the seniors. And these are like small little connections that, and in the first place, may not mean a lot, but they really mean a lot to make creating a connected community. So they start to look at all of the different things. Here's, as I described, the kid-friendly city initiative. And one of the things, one of the women, I'll show you in a moment, but real quickly, one of the things that after COVID, when we started to bring back, there's something also that I noticed, which is that I expected that there would be a lot of dancing where we were, and there is dancing in clubs, but what there wasn't was dancing where anybody could come and participate. So we started a program called Dancing in the Streets, and it was so popular, hundreds and hundreds of people, that we actually ended up now having 4 Saturdays a month where we have different kinds of dance coming into the public space. In the first hour, people, they just practice with a teacher, and then they all dance together for the rest of the night. And again, this is a space where people are mingling, but there's no alcohol, there's no drugs, there's nothing there. And like I'm saying, there's hundreds of people in our public square now coming out to dance on a regular basis. And it's a part of like a wellness programming in our downtown. One of the women had taken photographs of all of the families during COVID on their porches. And we made a pop-up gallery to showcase that art, and then to ask and all of those community throughout our city to come together to see the art in the downtown, so that they, who may not even come into the downtown ever, would have an opportunity to come to the downtown, see themselves, see everybody else in their community, and begin to bond. And we also use it as a kickoff for our kid-friendly cities. We also began to create spaces where women are able to talk about domestic violence through our literature festival, which was described earlier, as well as through other platforms, so that they could help to empower other women and teach them about ways that they've worked on with these issues. So, and I just wanted to really quickly transition for you and go into how this turns into something for Placemaking US, which is more national, because that was just a specific city in Santa Ana. But one of the things that we've seen is that for a long time, people have controlled they have built freeways, and what we're starting to see with like a regenerative kind of placemaking occurring is that people are starting to take out freeways. And this is a huge initiative across the US. And for me, again, this is something that is something that was cutting up space is now trying to heal those space fissures and creating space so that there's a democratization of public space. And we're seeing this in cities. There's over 60 different projects across the United States right now. And as you can see, this green belt in Boston is one example. And these are all the different places that it's already been completed. So there was a period where a lot of these freeways have gone through the middle of marginalized communities. And one of our placemaking projects in Seattle right now is specifically a small community called South Park, where this has actually occurred right through the center. People are said to live 13 years less in this part of Seattle because of the freeway that is going through. And again, a woman who was concerned for her children and for their lives actually is the one who brought this project, and we began a work group. And in a very short period of time, we found that we have the opportunity to do a feasibility study about the removal of this freeway, as well as a community visioning of what they would do with that land. And of course, this thoughtfulness of women is also that concern for gentrification. So even prior to creating the plan is the thoughts of how to create a community land trust, how to create places for affordable homes that people within the community can purchase before someone from outside can purchase. And all of that goes into that stewardship and care of what happens within a space. And these are just a couple more images of that. And then this is that community. Sorry, I'm going very quickly, but I'm curious. Another thing, and I'm actually going to pass this, is there was a period where all of our rivers were being controlled and dammed and organized. And now what we're seeing is that there's this but they were also industry built up around the rivers. And now they're starting to kind of reclaim rivers for people and remove industrial areas, try to clean up the rivers and make them spaces that people can again utilize. And so to me, this is a very regenerative act, even though the fact that we like all of this control is being shifted into tourism, etc. And we're also seeing groups being able to share in spaces like Oklahoma, which that was showing, they actually have a space to share, like through the First Native American Museum, where they actually are able to shape and tell their histories of space. And I was very moved when I came here, because it's interesting. I'd always been told that there was a Trail of Tears, which my family was a part of. But what's interesting is she's like, there wasn't one, there was hundreds of Trails of Tears, and everybody was relocated to this land. So this, again, spatial segregation in Oklahoma is very surprising, because it's a piece of history that I forgot, but even my family was a part of that history. Another thing that we're seeing is we have park spaces that are where people are now fighting. This is a park space in Birmingham, Alabama, where half of the park that doesn't have an entrance is all African-American, 100 organized African-American communities. And on the other side is Anglo communities. And there's only an entrance on one side. So again, this work to create a way for access for people of color to be able to utilize that park and to be able to be a part of the shaping of what occurs with this park is another one of our placemaking projects that we're looking at. And sorry, I don't know what my timing is, so I don't want to take up too much time, but I'm just going to try to move to the end because I don't know. We also have one last thing, which is there's a Renewable Nations Institute, and people are starting to bring in the awareness that climate change is real and that we need to start really bringing people together to figure out how we're going to navigate through this process of again, rebalancing our own ecosystem. Very quickly, there's two last things. One of the things deep in the city that I find that's very beautiful is when people take and they rewild spaces that actually had, that are buildings. And this was just a standout project that is also one of the placemaking projects where the rooftop and the expression of arts is all around climate change and our relationship to nature. And there's these beautiful expressions being shared to educate people around climate change. And the activity is like, she's a bird, this is a nest. She's explaining that whole process here. So and the one last thing is in community, and this is in Long Beach. Another one of the projects is where places that are just abandoned, there was a dream for fostered youth to be able to actually have a space when they come out of foster care to be able to work and transition back into society, and have kind of stewardship and care by folks in the community to help them, because there's a huge situation where fostered youth often end up in jail. So one of the things was through growing, and these two women, Lindsay and Dina, actually drew out their plan for this, and it was going to be through urban farming, which also goes into food security. And they found that they were given a lot by the city, and this lot actually, as you can see here, they decided to just turn it into a farm, and they brought soil, and they brought youth are out there with them, and they've been working to actually essentially rewild this space. And then this was showing that we have a beautifully knitted food system in Long Beach, and where you bring together the folks who are seeding the food, eating the food, and also cooking the food, and eating the food. So anyway, that's the very last thing that I wanted to show there. So
thank you, Madeline. That was really extensive, and thank you for sharing that. And you really touch on so many aspects there of the sort of diversity, the inclusion, the social inclusion, and this creativity, and kind of, you know, the cross section and intersectionality of it all, I think is quite amazing. And probably I'd love to go deeper into that, probably about sort of more engagement, understanding how that engagement sort of takes place, and really having the trust. But as I said, we'll talk about that after we've heard our final and last speaker, Elsa Marie de Silva. Welcome. Elsa is the founder of the Red Dot Foundation, and from India, and is the president of the Red Dot Foundation and the Global USA. It's a technology platform, and also its technology platform, Safe City, which crowdsources personal experiences of sexual violence and abuse in public and private spaces globally. Since Safe City started in 2012, in December 2012, it's become the largest crowd map on the issue in India and abroad. So on that note, I would love to hear more about that, as we all would. So I hand it over to you, Elsa Marie.
Thank you, Rosina, and it's great to be part of this panel. Madeline, could you please make me the co-host?
Yes, please, Madeline, because I passed all the rights to you.
okay.
Yeah, so I have a little presentation as well. Yeah, it works. So, yeah, so I work on ending violence against women and girls through crowdsourced data and advocacy. I started on this journey about 10 years ago in December 2012 when a young woman was gang raped on a bus in Delhi and then left to die on the streets. That raised a lot of conversation. People were outraged, not only in India, but abroad. And at the time, I was working in the corporate sector. And this incident made me think about my own experiences of being sexually harassed on buses, on trains, in the street, at the workplace. And, I started to remember all these incidents that had occurred throughout my life, but I had suppressed. And so did my friends, and they started to talk about it too. And what was common was that none of us had actually spoken about it to each other or even made official complaints. But we are not alone. 1 in 3 women around the world experience some form of sexual assault at least once in their lifetime. 80% of us choose not to talk about it. And this is so pervasive and common that it's part of our daily routine. So when we are talking about public spaces, it's very important to understand who's occupying that public space, what is their experience in that public space, and is it a level playing field when you don't really feel comfortable, safe, or even included in the design of the public space? Because many of these incidents make you feel like you want to disappear, you make yourself feel, you shrink in size, you make yourself not noticeable, and you self-censure. So you limit your own opportunities, you restrict your mobility. In many conservative families as well in India, under the guise of safety, they limit the movements of the women and girls in public spaces. My finding in the last 10 years is that not everyone understands the full spectrum of abuse that constitutes sexual harassment and abuse. It ranges from nonverbal at one end, which is staring, ogling, taking pictures without permission, showing pornography without consent, and indecent gestures. Then there's the verbal forms of it, which is catcalling, commenting. And, currently I'm in Europe, and last week I was at the World Justice Forum at The Hague. I stepped out of my hotel and we had these 2 young men pass by on their bicycles and they said, "Show me your boobies." Now, what gives them the right to talk about my personal body parts? And they thought it was a joke and they rushed away. But imagine if I was a younger woman who was not so confident or not very familiar in this city, and you're not expecting something like this to happen. It can really throw you off guard. And also, you have to see where you are. Sometimes there's nobody else on the street around you. Sometimes it's dark and lonely. And that can also add to the feeling of being unsafe. And then you have the physical forms of harassment, which is touching, groping, stalking, sexual assault, rape, and domestic violence. And I'd also encourage you to think about space, not only in terms of physical space, but the digital space, because in the world that we currently live in, we always transverse between these spaces. And the behavior that we experience in the physical space is now getting translated into the digital space as well. So our solution is Safe City, which crowd maps anonymous stories of sexual and gender-based violence. These are personal stories, either submitted by survivors or witnesses. And the idea is to document these experiences, because when I showed the previous slide, 80% of us don't document them, then in fact, it never happened. There's no proof of it. And there's no data to really force us to think of solutions. So the way we capture these stories are that every story is geotagged on the map, and all these bubbles in red with numbers on it are clusters of stories. You can zoom in right up to the street level and check the patterns and trends that are emerging at the neighborhood level. This is data that doesn't exist currently with the police or any other official authority. 90% of our reporters have said that they have never gone to the police. And even if you went to use the police data, for example, in India, you wouldn't have the granularity in information to show you the scope of the problem. So it's a global application on the mobile, Android and iOS, as well as a web app. We also have a missed call. So we are not saying that if you don't have access to a device or you're digitally not literate, you can't make a complaint. The idea is all stories should be documented. How have we used them? It's very interesting how people have chosen to use these data points. So one is at the individual level to make you more situationally aware of what kind of incidences you could face, and then gives you ideas for strategies to respond to them. So often as an individual, when we experience these incidents of harassment, for example, we are made to believe by the society around us that it was our fault. We were wearing the wrong clothing, we were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and so on and so forth. But when you can see that it is a constant trend that is occurring, then it kind of shifts the focus from you as the victim to what's causing this to happen, and am I able to regain my agency to deal with it? And you can see that this young girl in the first picture is painting. So since we are talking about art, if you know what's happening where, you can use that place to actually promote advocacy on the topic. So we've used wall murals, for example, to put community on notice to say this is happening in your neighborhood. We call them talking walls, where survivors have painted their feelings on the walls. These have been outside girls' colleges, near tea stalls, outside public toilets. And, they've painted staring eyes or subtle messaging that translates to look with your heart, not with your eyes. We won't be intimidated by your gaze. We will break our silence. But all of this being projected through the walls. And it has been extremely powerful in getting the community to actually stop this inappropriate behavior. The data itself is a great starting point for dialogue in the community, because we have already seen in the previous presentation and in the first speaker's narrative that communities are important. We are all part of communities, and yet there's a silence around this issue that needs to be broken. And with data is information, you can hold institutions accountable in doing their jobs, make the systems work for you. For example, in India, we have the laws for sexual harassment in different scenarios, but it's the understanding and in the implementation of the law that is poor. So with this data set, can we strengthen these systems? Can we work with these institutions to have a better understanding of the nature of sexual violence? So for example, our data set shows that the peak during the day is between 12 noon and 2 p.m. And if you go to a man and show him the data set, he will most likely be surprised, as is the case with many of our data analysts, as to why is the peak in bright daylight. And their understanding of sexual harassment is that it only occurs in the dark. And when we are talking about public space, most women and girls, especially in a country like India, are out and about doing their daily chores or going about their daily routine in broad daylight. And when it turns dark, they are at home. So they might be facing a different form of violence, which may not appear on our map, which is focused mainly on public space. So the peaks are at a time that people are not people in power are not really expecting. And then when you think about, okay, are they designing systems? Because one of the favorite responses for women's safety is lighting, street lighting. It needs to be fixed, and place CCTV cameras all over the city. But is lighting the only response, or is there other responses that one can have to deal with this kind of violence? And unless you understand what kind of violence is happening where, you may be very limited in the solutions that you propose. We recently did a series of public space interventions with UN Habitat's Her City Toolkit, where we use the Safe City reporting platform as well as the Inhabit app to capture who's using that space. So it's like taking snapshots of the movements across a place and across time. And what we noticed is that from all the inhabitants, less than 16% are actually women. And women never loiter in a public space. Men loiter. Women don't have spaces. There's no street furniture for them to sit down, to be in a space, to just be. There's also a Why Loiter movement in India where they're encouraging women to just feel comfortable sitting in a park by themselves, or just placing a rug on the grass and lying down. That's absolutely not done. Even a tea stall, it's a small kiosk on the side of the road, is a male only space. You'll never find a woman hanging out drinking her cup of tea over there. So again, when we are looking at public spaces, who is occupying that public space? What are they doing in that public space? How are they treating other people in that public space? This has a direct correlation, again, on economic empowerment of women, on their career choices, on their educational choices. With the Safe City data, a research paper was written by Girija Borkar, and she put an economic cost to sexual harassment of women and girls in Delhi. They spent about $300 per year to upgrade to a more safer form of transportation, which is like a shared Uber or a private car or taxi. Now, this is not sustainable in the long run because we want public transport to be safe and inclusive. Also, $300 is a lot of money in my part of the world. It's 1 month's salary for most people. She also, in that paper, talks about how women compromise on their educational choices because they don't select, they select a college or an educational institution closer to their home so they don't have to travel far. And it may not always be the best option for them or the one that offers a course of their liking. They just compromise on that. And if you look at women's participation in the formal labor force in India, year on year, it's been dropping. And today it's at 16%. It hasn't reached pre-COVID levels, whereas for men, it has surpassed pre-COVID levels. And that indicates to you that one of the reasons why women are dropping out of the labor force, the first main reason is lack of quality childcare facilities, but the second is the perception of safety. And therefore, it forces us to think about how are we designing our cities, our towns, our public spaces, our transportation, and our designers and planners even thinking about women's lived experiences, because clearly there's no data that's being collected and they don't have any idea about the nuances of the daily routine of people. So this is our work. It's low tech, low cost. We complement it with a lot of community engagement, trying to help communities and nonprofits on the ground understand how this open source data can be used in their own work to make cities and communities safer. And we are mapping it to SDGs 5, which is gender equality, 11, which is sustainable cities and communities, and 16, peace and justice. And we've we are the largest crowd map in the world. Most of the stories have come through face-to-face discussions that we've done with people, helping them understand the nature and spectrum of abuse, the laws in India and their rights, and even encouraging them to go back to the formal system and report. We've engaged over 1 million citizens in this effort. So I'm going to stop there and hand it back to Louisa and to Rosina. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsa. Yes, it's a very interesting project. Congratulations, because I understand, what it means empowering women with such a project, and give them a possibility to fully enjoy outdoor spaces and feel safe while, walking around during the day, and also having opportunities to meet with others. It's very important, other women and girls, and have the right to actually leave the city. Well, I'm very interested to now find some common contents that could be linked these 3 different speakers. Since I see similarities from Madeline and Elsa, very attached to the ground and to social concerns, and also very attached to real people, because it's all about creating also connections, a chain of trust, putting people together, safe environment. So how this is a question for Lisa, because you have this very important position, I would say. And actually, I would like to ask, before I ask Lisa, to ask Madeline, where can we buy those T-shirts, Woman in Power, so that we can help the entrepreneur, which I would like to have that T-shirt, just for fun, but it's a way also to help. Yeah, you are muted.
I'll put it in the link. I'll put it
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. So now the question for Lisa. So how do you envision those kind of practices? Because I think this is also one of the challenges that we have in Europe, to link some strategic thinking that are developed by the EU Commission on art, culture, and creative interventions in public space with these groups, communities, bottom-up organizations that are already actually doing what the Commission is looking for, because it is a way of putting these different interests on the same table.
Thank you very much. You make me very happy with exactly this question I've been waiting for. But also, Madeleine, thank you so much for the inspiration. I've been taking screenshots on your presentation, because so that's like one of the answers, is like having very specific action examples, where it's also like it's difficult to say no and easy to say yes. Like especially with like the dancing, it's like, it's because, worst case scenario, you don't need a lot of equipment, like, have a USB, like a Bluetooth speaker and a and a phone and a space, and that's it. So it's, so things like this are really, really important for the bureaucrats. And I say that with all of my love and support, because I want to just like kind of crush the myth that like bureaucrats are like ice cold machines. It's actually, you have to understand, it's like that the European government, Parliament, Council, and Commission, running the European Union, their staff is actually 2% of the staff of the White House. So just to see, it's like, so, and then in Europe, we have like the complexity of like different cultures and whatsoever. So it's kind of like the issue we've got here is like there are a lot of topics, there are a lot of complexities, and there's just simply not enough muscle in the room who can just like catch everything. So we can either choose to complain about it or just see that as an opportunity, because, you know, also the, you know, dark magic lobbyists, they see that very much as an opportunity, because it's like, well, okay, let's just help you, because like the way how lobbyism works is just like, okay, you have to do this because you're a bureaucrat, you have to do policy, it doesn't matter with or without us. So you don't have time, let me give you here a shortcut. Here's an example. Oh, what are your KPIs? Happy to deliver it. That's the mechanics of lobbyism, right? So like if we turn it the other way around and just say like simply that, we have the situation that culture creative industries is the new kid on the block. There are not a lot of policy officers who actually trained or understanding in culture creative industries because they haven't been trained and also they haven't been acknowledged. See it in the time frame is 2019 officially culture creative industry, CCSI, as we call it. There are a lot of abbreviations. That was when just the parliament just got elected. So it was like in the first year. So of course, politically, there was like no interest for politicians to position themselves as culture creative attachés because they weren't like officially acknowledged. So the next time is in 2 years with the next election. So that's politics, that's parliament. Of course, there are departments for creativity, for culture and all of that, but like they're really conservative kind of, and also that they haven't had a lot of money. So, and that is now shifting. So timing wise, the next 2 years are going to be utterly important to position on a political level. So like for all of my friends on the EU level is here, because the advantage is that, you know, most of everything is very transparent. Know your members of the European Parliament on your national level. Look into their profile and see if they have any kind of traceability in any kind of culture creative stuff. Also, sometimes smaller countries, you just know them. Like I was just in Portugal and Sweden. They just know each other. The children going to kindergarten together. So that's like the first thing is like, because policy by some comes across like really rigid and hard and like super formal, but also they are people, they care. So like find their buttons, right? So it's like there is, so like I have a wonderful connection, a Bulgarian woman, she's the rapporteur on in the parliament for the Digital Privacy Pact. But I know she has a big background in entrepreneurship and SME support. Then there is another MEP, she is like very much in industrial entrepreneurship, regions development, but she has a huge passion for arts and craft. So that's like the thing is like understand, because like, let's put it like that. My title is orchestrator. So like I'm taking this whole music thing very serious, because policy is very much about that you have to bring people with different instruments together to align in harmony, but also sometimes disharmony actually can be beautiful. So, but like to say it with the wonderful words of the Queen of Blues, Ma Rainey, blues is not about people knowing you, it's about you knowing people. And I think that mindset is the best way how to run policy. Understand your audience, understand the soft and the hard buttons, and then just start conversations, because they're public servants. It's their job to listen to you. You just have to knock on their door, because I'm on the other side. And they like, when I got introduced into like the departments of the commission, I was like, why would they listen to me? Like, you know, and it was actually absolutely on the contrary, because, you know, they're kind of like trapped in their cubicles. They're being told about there's sun outside and flowers and bees. And they're like, so then you come from the outside and tell these stories. And then they just didn't let me go and just asked me to join advisory boards and high-level roundtables and be like an expert reviewer. So that's also like for all friends and the European friends, here is like, there are a lot of systems and forums. Become an expert reviewer on the Horizon programs. You have to go through the EU login transparency portal, hashtag 80s internet. feel the pain, just do it, it's fine. We all don't like it, we have to dance with the music anyway, right? You know, if it would be easy, everybody could do it. So there are a lot of opportunities. They're just like really shitty at marketing. So that's, you know, the SEO of the Commission's website is atrocious. So that's like the thing, is like, don't ask for an invite. As I know, especially women, speaking for myself, is like, in the time where I was like growing into my entrepreneurship role, I realized, consciously or subconsciously, I always was waiting for permission. It's a really weird thing, because like when I grew up, I was like, I had to ask for permission. And at the moment where I just took something, and just like as a little girl, I have the memory, I just like wanted to take this piece of chocolate, and I got flipped on my hands, because like you have to ask for permission. My brother, of course not. It's such a subconscious thing, and it's like, and it really is in your head. And I'm now, just in the last 10 years, learned to give myself permission. Also, you can kind of like counterbalance that in just being like nice and lovely and charming and friendly, because, you know, when you stumble a little bit, you just say like, oh yeah, haha. You know, so it's like, don't be afraid. It's like, it feels like you go in a different land. It feels like you have to learn a different language. You know, I didn't study this. I just find it utterly fascinating. Just hang out with people, you know, sometimes have a straight face and just like write down all of the abbreviations and Google them after the meeting, right? Or sometimes just like, okay, ask for clarifications. Like, sorry, just like, what are you talking about? Can you please explain? That's also one of the things in diplomacy, especially in a room with men, I've not noticed in politics, is because everybody has to show face and can't say like, okay, I didn't understand this. I actually do this all the time. I go into the room and say, okay, can we just please clarify when we talk about this means, and it's okay that I look stupid. But like what happens is you change the temperature in a room, because you give other people the permission to also ask questions for clarification. So a big loop back, sorry, I'm now starting to answer that question, Louisa, sorry. But like the issue is, when we bring different worlds together, the alignment of language is one of the first things. Because when we like in culture creativity, like when we're talking about production, it means something totally different when we talk with a policymaker. Like, let me give you an example. I had like a conversation with the European platform, European Association for Museums, NEMO, wonderful team. Also, they are they're also taking care of the independent small museums. And what they do is like they invite politicians to work for a day in a museum. So they have to give out tickets and show the kids around and clear out the bins and everything to get an understanding. So they're taking them on a journey. And they now, of course, because the European Association, they are very much allowed and welcome to participate in policy making. But they're like, how do we do this? And then I just told them, like, one of the biggest terms we have at the moment in the fight against climate change is adaptation. So it's like transition, transformation, adaptation. Just like do the bullshit bingo words, sell it together, just throw that in. And said like, look, if you position museums as local adaptation spots and as trainings, like as upskilling, reskilling, also wonderful term, you know, if you position that, then the bureaucrats can understand that because they're very familiar with the adaptation one. But then it was like, okay, but with adaptation, we mean something else. It was like, yeah, but let's get you in the room. And then you can talk about adaptation and the 50 shades of what you want to do. So that is like, the first phase is seriously just be aware of your power, that they have to answer your emails, they have to let you go in, everything is transparent. Find your MEPs, your members of the European Parliament. They want to get re-elected. If you just present them, there's a really cool, nice project locally, like make them look good. You know, photo op, children, flowers, let them go for a dance, right? You know, so and educate them like what is actually happening in their constituency. And then number two is like once you create the room, and it can be at a party while you're dancing. That's the cool thing with arts and culture. You can create spaces, casual spaces, not like official meetings, just simply like tonight for everyone in Brussels, by the way, we are running our European Bauhaus Ideation Award ceremony, 5 p.m. onwards. I will drop the link at Yadin Hospice. And I'm using this as a platform. There's nothing like free drinks. I just invited a bunch of people I wanted to talk with a long time anyway, take them to the bar, and then you should talk with this person. You should talk with this person. You should talk with this person. And then we have a lot of fun. And then tomorrow I will write emails like, thank you very much for your meeting. We've talked about casually these points. Let's make it happen. It's no magic. It's just muscle work.
Yes, Lisa, thank you for your answer and for elaborating, a lot regarding this. In my experience, I always have the feeling that because I consider myself as a member of the civil society organization that I'm running, City Space Architecture. So even if I have experience in academia, research, I'm also an entrepreneur, but I'm working a lot on public space on the ground. So I always have this feeling that and when I say we, I mean all the people that I know working on public space have a completely different approach and a completely different way to see things. And that those people sitting in the EU Parliament or even at the municipality, are a completely different kind of people, and I would love to see those big politicians, for example, go to Medellin and dance with common people, for a party in the evening. But I'm not sure this can happen, actually. Medellin in the US.
I will make it happen, Medellin. If you see more people dancing in European
cities,
does.
I do see people from the city come down and they do dance. It's awesome. And I love that Luisa said this humanization of people and recognizing that people are people first, humans first, is really important. And it was a huge shift for me coming from activism into actually working within a downtown, because being in a creative space, you're actually thinking about how to connect people, and rather than thinking that somebody sitting on a dais who you're fighting for some change is like representing a system of necessary change, and you're fighting against them as if they're a human being sitting in that seat. And I think it's really important to just remember. And we've been having a lot of breakfasts where our councilmen and mayor and such can sit down with people in community and have breakfast, because there's a lot of things that happen when you're just sitting and eating, it changes the way you dialogue.
Yes, that's crucial. If we want to really change the system, as I can read from, the image, which is in the backdrop of Lisa's image, full image, change the system. Exactly. So, and in regard of public space, there is a need for a lot of changes. We said language, we said way of coming together and share, practice, know each other better, because we are all humans, and public space is a resource for all of us. What's more, do you have any additional recommendations, for our politicians that we can give them? Elsa, maybe from your perspective?
So one is, the data. Do you have enough data? And if you don't have enough data, you have to collect it and make it easy for people to share it. Second is, when we are talking about public spaces, or even how, who's using that city, who's missing, and is it only for one group of people? Because I work on women's rights, but then there's the LGBTQ community. There are various other vulnerable groups that don't feel comfortable in certain parts of the city. So who's missing, and how can we make it more inclusive? So I think they have to go back to the ground, observe, use observational data, collect people's experiences, and invite community-based suggestions to strengthen the policies. That's my recommendation.
I'd like to jump in there, Elsa, actually, and ask, how easy is it to actually access that data? And do you collaborate also with private organizations where you create some kind of partnership? I say this because, we tried a similar thing here, and it was with one of the Belgian mobile providers who were able to then, because they have the data, and so they're able to see how people move and who's coming from outside, who's coming from within that municipality. So how did that work for you?
So the data that we have on the Safe City side is completely generated by us. That means a lot of boots on the streets, talking to people, explaining them their rights, explaining to them, why they should feel comfortable reporting, even if it's anonymously. So it's a lot of investment. But if telecom companies have it, for example, or other data sets, why are they not available in the public domain for people to use? And the Safe City data set is only one kind of data set. It's personal experiences, but we use the Inhabit app. Again, it was our people on the ground who went and, used the app to capture the scenarios of how people were using that space. And then we have to study the data points that are emerging. So again, I don't have to tell this group that we have to be aware of our biases when looking at the data, because again, who's missing, what are the trends emerging, but why are they emerging? Constantly questioning the data. Some of the ways that we've used to generate the data, because we are a nonprofit, we don't have large budgets, is to work with young college students who are early adopters of technology, but also most likely to be, victims of sexual harassment and abuse. And it is in their interest to, they are also the ones using public transport the most and traveling throughout the city. So we've used them, and they are a great resource because, they want their city safe. They want to see improvements. And if you give them the skills to be active citizens, then they are going to be part of a functioning democracy. When we talk about rights and citizen participation, is it only during the election cycle that we should come out and vote, or don't we have opinions on how budgets are spent? At least in India, nobody ever has a say in how elected representatives spend those budgets. But when you have this data set, you can, with your community, make a case for some of that budgets to be spent in certain ways. So we've seen the power of the community to actually push for that kind of change. And of course, we partner with a lot of grassroots organizations, residential associations, which are citizen groups. So I think these structures exist in a city, and they should be used more often, I feel, in helping design the city better.
Thanks for sharing that. I want to sort of go back a little bit to the beginning there. And
I think Madeline wanted to add something.
Sorry, Madeline, continue there.
Oh, I just wanted to say that speaking of what Elsa is describing, just from a very basic thing, is this visibilization, the data sets create visibility. And in the same way, I remember in the very beginning of trying to understand how to create safe spaces when it comes to gentrification and this fear of displacement is people have to know their neighbors. And that's the very beginning of that process. You have to know who they are. And I remember when we first came down, it's about even taking like people meeting each other and then visibilizing who is in the community. Who is the community? Who is everybody in the community? And once it's visible, if somebody were to be pushed out, everybody now is questioning what happened to the person next door, because they now know who that person is. Whereas anonymity and this idea of like just being alienated from others, women not knowing that there's other women in their own community that have the same story, like that actually helps to continue and foster sort of the violence versus having the actual connectivity. So there's this thing to me about like that I'm hearing sort of a theme of reweaving. There's this process of reweaving humanity into spaces, knowing your neighbor instead of not knowing your neighbor, making something that's invisible visible, and really making that an important piece of not being discarded or alienated or put aside, so that it's recognized.
So how easy in saying that was it for you, going back to your Santa Ana project, of having that radical inclusion, and how easy was it to gain that trust? I mean, were you having local ambassadors, for that kind of co-creation project process to ensure every voice or every, sort of part of the community was included in that process, whether it was a women's group or whether it was actually the placemaking projects? How easy was it to do that?
It was actually extremely difficult. And one of the things is, to be honest, like I've been in the downtown for almost 8 years now. In the very beginning, the main thing is that there's a lot of, because of this fear of displacement, there are people that I started to recognize that the narrative of displacement was actually fueling displacement. And it's not normal that people think that it's the narrative that's actually creating. But I recall there was this point where we were just starting to building the connection between people. And one of the folks would actually go with a troupe of musicians down the street, up and down the street, to try and say hello and bring music and bring some joy. But what's so interesting is he would hear stories from people saying, we're being pushed out, we need to leave because we're not allowed to be here. And I recall there was this, but through this process of continuously going out over and over and talking to people, we were able to show people that actually nobody is leaving. There is actually still a majority of the Latino population, which is specifically the population that was fearing this displacement. And we had to show them, look at your neighbors. Everybody is still here. You don't have to have this fear of leaving because they're still here. It's a story. And so one of the things is, I'll never forget, in the paper, there was this woman who also, they were writing the narrative in the paper that people were saying, which was helping to fuel the fear. And one of our administrators said, I need you to walk with me down this street and you need to see these stories for yourself. And that article that she wrote was changed for the first time. And I'll never forget, she started the article in Spanish, which I had never seen, using the language of the people on the street. And she wrote, the heading of the article said, "From gentrification to Calle Cuatro," which was changing the narrative, number one. And it started in the language of the people. And I cried when we first read that story, because it was the first time that somebody was sharing like about who's actually there, rather than talking about who's going to be there. instead of the people who are there. And like, I don't know, again, it's just like, I don't even know if I answered specifically your question, but it took a long time to get to a point where people like the Centenera Living with this power, women's power, came out and said, I want to start talking about my city and what I love about my city. And her products were about that and about empowering that. And it's a shift of narrative. And the shift of narrative, you start to build and attract all these different folks that are a part of this new narrative. And that new narrative starts to create what you're describing as the beauty, because the beauty is that aggregation and this sense that community itself starts to see itself as belonging rather than always feeling pushed out.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. I want to kind of, I guess, bring it all a little bit together in the sort of pre-summary, and then I'll hand it back to Louisa to close up. Obviously, we're looking at India, US, and then we've got Europe here. And I'm thinking, you know, as a session, we were talking about the new European values of this inclusion, sustainability, and beautiful way of living. And how there is this, if we're thinking about systems, the big divide between the global north and the global south. And how important is it, Lisa, I pose this to you before we sort of pass on to Louisa, that when we're exchanging the stories and learning from each other, that also when we're talking about sort of breaking the silos and, you know, looking at also cross-border collaboration, but also how much we can learn and exchange from the global south, knowing that, of course, when we talk about sustainability and the climate crisis, we know the global south is, of course, impacted heavily, and women have been, you know, impacted extremely heavily, especially during the pandemic. We know with all the statistics that are out there, that how we can create further connections, whether it be through the new European Bauhaus or whether it's also with the climate KIC that you're involved in, how we can create more connections on that level.
Just get involved. So there are a lot of programs out there. The thing is, what we've noticed with EIT is because it's so techy, so it's also so exclusive for culture creative industry, because like our language is quite cold. It's about digital and scale and startups and, you know, and profit. And we are trying to warm up our language to turn hackathons into prototyping and SMEs into actually, because culture creative industries is very much about like the SSME, the single small medium enterprise. That's also like going to be a policy shift. So the thing is, like, there are a lot of projects out there because they have to disseminate it now. And even though it feels cold and not for you, walk in the room anyway. I mean, like, at least you can try and apply, right? Or like just go to the info session. And if it does make sense and it feels like you're listening to gibberish, okay, good, you will learn. But see the other way around. It's like there are a lot of projects happening now, and projects on European level are actually kind of like outsourced policy activities, because at the end of the day, they are data points for the Commission. So like the whole thing, what happens, okay, they want to do policy, they put money into projects to experiment and then get the data so they can funnel that information back into policy. So this is not about only getting the EU money and getting involved. It's actually, but you're participating in data feedback on how to make policy. Yeah, just get involved. There are no excuses. Get involved in all different levels. Because just to say also, it's because we are in this time where we are at, in a time of war. Not participating is enabling the evil, and we have to resolve now, and that is very, very serious. And I was during the COVID crisis, I lived in Portugal, and I have so much respect, because I originally come from Germany and we invented complaining. But also it's like it's a richer country, and you know they did have support. But I lived in Portugal during the time, and like the humbleness and the kindness in the community, the way how they supported themselves, each other. That was the point. It's like, you know, they had all reason to complain. And I was in manufacturing back then, and I still remember I was talking with the head seamstress, and I was like, you know, how are you going? And she was like, she just looked at me and said like, I'm doing this because I have to answer to my grandchildren when they look back and ask me, what back then, what have you done? And I need to have an answer for that. And I will have an answer for that. So that's the thing, is like, especially for women, I know it's like going on stage, speaking about it, chasing people, doing a follow-up email. When you write emails and you don't get an answer, write a follow-up email. But at a certain point, you get so passionate, and the cause is too great to shy away from participating, even though you feel like, you know, imposter syndrome, or talking for myself, experience imposter syndrome, or what can I do, or oh, I'm going to embarrass myself, or what can I? But yeah, you know, F all of that. Come on, we don't have the time. There is so much out there. See the opportunities. I'm in Brussels. I'm waiting for you. I'll know really cool places and stuff. So like, this is an invite. Sorry, blabbing on. Yeah, that.
Thanks, Lisa, for your enthusiasm there and for taking part, of course. And thanks to everybody. I'll hand over to Louisa just to do a little closing summary and bring us back to the empowering women, public space and climate change, and then we'll stop the recording. So.
Yes. While I say just few words to close this amazing talk, I would like to ask Madeline, please, can you give me back the right of organizer, because I'm not in control of the recording at the moment. Thank you. Yes, it was an amazing talk, actually, and we covered so many topics. You know, it was a high-level discussion on the political level, on the practical level, on the human level, which is always, you know, very important to put into the discussion, especially when we talk about policies, because the policies have a direct impact on the lives of human beings. And especially for us, since we work on public space, many of us, I mean, Elsa, Madeline, I hope also Lisa is a fan of public space, because, you know, the system should also change to improve public space in terms of quality, accessibility, safety, and you know, also for designers to be into a more comprehensive approach by applying rules of universal design, and so that we design for all. And when we say all, we mean really all people that have the right and would like to actually experience all the opportunities that cities can offer. So thank you again for joining. Madeline, did you manage to give me back the right so that I can?
Okay, so I just went under your name, and is it to change host?
Yes, please.
Yes, so it says.
Okay. Yes. So now I'm back in control of the registration, because I really would like to keep this registration in our archive and share also to all of those that could not attend. We always want to actually give a possibility to others to access these conversations while we are developing a more structured model for all these talks. So thank you again. Thanks, Rosina.
I'm sorry, will you guys put your address into the chat so that I'll send Rosina some shirts and I'll connect, because I noticed her link is not working right, but I'll send you all one. So if you put your address there, I can copy and paste them.
Yes, sure. Let's do some networking activity now. before we close.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or we can close up and of course we continue just to finish.
Yes, okay, we'll stop the
Okay.
recording now and we stay just a few seconds. Okay, thanks a lot for joining
you.
again.
Thank you.